Do you love movies of a certain age? Do you miss the days of VHS tapes and VCRs and video rental stores? Is the thought of another 80s movie being remade seem inconceivable? If you want to go back to school, back to the future, or even back to the beach, then the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast is for you. I'm Tim Williams, the creator and host, and on each episode, I'm joined by a guest co-host as we revisit a different 80s flick to discuss our first-time watch memories, iconic scenes, and even learn some behind-the-scenes stories along the way. New episodes drop every other Friday on your favorite podcasting platform. So make like a tree, get out of here, and go listen to an episode of the 80s Flick Flashback Podcast.
Welcome to this Moving Panels one-shot as we continue our ride through Mandrake the Magician and the old classic movie serial. Last time we talked about chapters 1, 2, and 3. And now we're going to do the next 3, 4, 5, and 6. In case you forgot, last time we left this story, Betty had been lured to some radio station, and then the Wasp used the ray gun, to cause the building to collapse. Mandrake, of course, gets there in time, but we think that the building has collapsed on top of them. So what would happen? Well, that was what moves us on into Chapter 4, The Secret Passage. So the building has collapsed on Betty and Mandrake. We then find out that Mandrake's just kind of holding it up and calling for Lothar to come get them out. Now, I've read more of the comics, and here's the thing. Again, this is not Mandrake the Magician from the comics. Because if it was, you know what he would have done by this point? He would have turned the beam that he was holding into like just butterflies or something. He just would have been like, butterflies. And then just when butterflies, they'd be out. Because I'm really starting to believe Mandrake, in the comic at least, had some serious powers. But we don't see any of that. This is just your typical, gangsters and almost the private investigator going after them is what Mandrake is. So we then have where thugs are searching Mandrake's apartment. Mandrake then slams the door to get their attention and then uses some sort of secret passage, I guess thus the name of the chapter, to come up on the other side of the apartment, but we don't see it, which is weird. And then there's a fight, or, a bunch of flailing arms. Like I talked about in previous, fights are horrible. We do see one of the thugs grab that electric gun that we talked about. It's the one that's sitting in his table, picks it up, goes to fire it, he gets electrocuted. One of the thugs gets away. Mandrake does fire off a shot, gets him in the shoulder, it appears. But the other two, he catches in this cage. It's like a wardrobe that's open, and they just both happen to be standing right where, if the door's just shut, they'd be trapped inside. Very convenient on the side of Mandrake there. So that happens. We then go to a magic store where Tommy was in this junior magician's meeting, and these two guys come in asking for the little smoke bomb powder, and I don't know why. I really want to know why these guys just randomly walk into a magic shop and ask for this powder. Then they start talking about Mandrake. Tommy overhears them, finds out where they're headed, and then he sneaks into the back of their car. And this is one of those things like, when Mandrake got himself kidnapped by the hypnotist and the thugs. This is just a reason for Tommy to be able to be in the back of the car so he can hear the plan, so that the plot can move forward. That is all that is. We then see a full-grown man jump out of the car while it's moving. It's supposed to be Tommy, little Tommy, but it is clear it is a full-grown man. Again, though, I have to commend the stuntmen in this for the work that they're doing. This was still early in movies and television shows. Things aren't refined as the way we're used to them now. So it was what it was. But Mandrake finds out about the the magician who tried to hypnotize him. Again, go back and listen to the last one shot to hear how that all is confusing. His name's Regan, and we find out that he is going to be performing at this mill place. I'll get to that in a minute. And so we see him getting ready, and they're telling him to put on a mask, which is so convenient for Mandrake, because when Mandrake gets there, Mandrake just decides to switch places with him, and he's going to do the act. So we see another kind of basic magic act. He pulls the tablecloth out from underneath some stuff. He makes some stuff fall out of and appear out of the tablecloth. There's a couple of camera trickery that allows him to do the tricks for a couple of these, but again, nothing amazing. And again, this is all being performed in front of this rotating mill. No water. There's no water. It's just a rotating mill. Don't know why it's there. So Regan is tied up in the back of the car with Lothar. He gets free. He very easily knocks out Lothar. I'm beginning to wonder what Lothar's purpose is other than driving the car. He goes back in, tells the other bad guys, "That's not me, that's Mandrake." And another fight, another bunch of flailing arms and people just falling over. Anyway, they end up above the mill, and then Mandrake ends up landing on the mill, and it's turning, and it's like, oh no! And so that's our cliffhanger. We then move into Chapter 5, The Devil's Playmate, and what happened to Mandrake? Well, he just fell into the basement. That's it. Just, yep. Oh, okay. I'm good. Gets up, goes back upstairs. The fight continues outside of the building. And Mandrake and Lothar get into the car and drive away. So now we get a little car chase here. Of course, that car chase ends when Lothar breaks through a barricade and stops. And the bad guys just drive right past them and off of a bridge. Because apparently they were not looking that there was a bridge. It was a dock, actually. Not even a bridge. It was a dock. Because they just run right out and into the water. There you go. So now we're back in Dr. Houston's lab. And Mandrake and all of the other people investigating. They realize that someone must be telling the bad guys their plans. Like, how do they know that they're going to be there? They, say, well, he knows, and he knows, Webster knows, and all this. Anyway, the others leave, and Mandrake asks Betty, "Where were you when you and Tommy were talking about this?" And I was in the hallway. And Mandrake says, "Well, let me try something." And so he pulls out this device, which is just this little box with like an antenna, long antenna sticking up. And he says it's a device that detects radio frequencies and that the antenna will react when it gets close to a transmitter. And as we then find out when they do their little search, apparently it's got to be right on top of that transmitter. I mean, right next to it. He's going down a bookshelf, book by book. And it's not until he hits the book that the transmitter is in that we then see the antenna move. And let me tell you, when I say we see the antenna move, I mean, if you're not looking, you ain't going to see this antenna move. It just barely moves. Just a little movement. Just stands up a little, gets straighter. Just a little straighter. But it's just so weird. I expected to make like a noise or something. Like do something else. Anyway, so now that they know that the lab is bugged, they decide to play a little trick on the bad guys, and they set up a little trap at a bank. So Lothar and Mandrake get to the bank. There's some thugs outside waiting. They trick them, and Mandrake ends up getting on the balcony above them, and he swings down to just kind of barrel through all three of them. Then they just grab one of the guys, throw him in the car, and they drive off. Yeah, that's it. We get another quick little car chase, which is over once Lothar just pulls into an alley. And again, the bad guys just drive by. These bad guys aren't paying attention to anything. Mandrake just grabs the guy in the back seat by the collar. Bad guy tells him everything. Absolutely everything. We then go and find the Wasp's men. that are trying to stop Mandrake and Lothar as they're now driving to the location the thug told them about. They're told, you got to stop them. So they pull this truck out into the road. Oh, that'll stop them. And Lothar just drives around it. He just drives around it. Like, they didn't even pull all the way in. It was like halfway through the road. So he just goes into the other lane, just drives around it. And then they call, they got by the barricade. Well, yes, because it was a horrible barricade. So they head to this power plant. The thugs find out that Mandrake and Lothar are almost there. So they decide to hide so they can jump them. I mean, doesn't matter that there's like 5 or 6 of them. There's only these 2 guys because these thugs are horrible. So again, there's a fight, a bunch of flailing arms and a bunch of falling down. They then get Mandrake and they tie him to this wall that's just filled with a bunch of switches. It's supposed to be some power energy wall. It says high voltage. And the thug that was tied up in the back of Mandrake's car, we just watch him just get out of his ropes and then he gets away with the other thugs. Of course, Mandrake also gets loose. He goes to help Lothar. Meanwhile, the Wasp is firing his little radium energy ray at the building, which brings it down just like we had in Chapter 3 of the building coming down on Betty and Mandrake. Now it's coming down on Lothar and Mandrake. And look, I gotta say, the collapses of the buildings is actually pretty good effect. It's something that I don't think is gonna happen nowadays, because it really looks like wood planks are coming down, and these actors are probably in danger. Whereas today they would, safety regulations would require them to use like foam, but then it would just be so obvious it was fake. I say the effects were good in this one. When the roof collapses, there's even like just, I don't know why it looks like dirt is just pouring down into the room, but it's a good effect. Ain't gonna lie. All right, moving right along into the final chapter that we're going to discuss today, Chapter 6, The Fatal Crash. So, of course, Mandrake and Lothar escaped. I mean, hey, we wouldn't have the rest of the serial without them. So, obviously, they escaped. And the thugs just stood there watching. And so they see them come out, and another fight ensues. Although this time we get to see Mandrake, which I assume was the stunt double for Warren Hull, jump off the top of a car onto him. And then he runs and jumps off another car. A lot of car jumping there. It's a nice little fight here, other than just the flailing arms and falling down. Mandrake then slashes their tires, which it took me a minute to realize what he had done and what had happened here. So I had to rewind it. What you see happen is one of the thugs throws his knife at Mandrake, and somehow the trajectory of it puts it right in front of Mandrake. But if you watch it, then all he really did was just drop it, because of the way he leans forward to throw it and where Mandrake picks it up at is so weird. It was weird. We then see the Wasp get onto that thug who was at the power plant because he let Mandrake escape, saying that, you fool, you tied him up, and Mandrake is a master in the untying of knots. Kid you not, that's a line. A master in the untying of knots. That is what the man says. He's a master in the untying of knots. Mandrake apparently, though, however, is not a master of tying knots, because let's remember the thug who had been tied up in the car, he got out. So is the thug also a master in the untying of knots? We may never know. And the reason we may never know is because this thug is then killed by poisonous gas that the Wasp seeps into the room. We see him kind of fight. It's kind of a gruesome scene when you actually think about it, because we see him struggling to get out until he finally collapses. So, yeah, we saw that happen. We then, for some random reason, we see Mandrake studying the knife. There's a microscope on the table. I don't know why. He's studying the knife, trying to find the source of the knife. He then talks about, this is an illegal deadly weapon. We should be able to track it. It's a pocket knife, by the way, who most people probably nowadays just carry around. Okay. But as he's showing out the chief of police and the other guy that's there, I think we're to assume that thugs sneak in and steal the knife. I kind of got lost there as to what just happened, but Tommy realizes the knife is gone. And then it just cuts to Dr. Houston, who is working on another ray. I don't know what the difference is between the one the Wasp already has, but anyway, there's a thug there. We then get cut back and forth between that and Mandrake just performing a trick for Betty and Tommy. Why? I don't know. I think it's to make them feel better. I wasn't sure, and it's a really stupid trick. We then go back to Dr. Houston, and he tricks the thug into grabbing. It's the same. It's the electric gun trick again, except this time he uses a little tool he's got there in the lab that he's working in, and he electrocutes the thug, which knocks him out. Dr. Houston then uses a radio that happens to be in that room. Why there's a radio that would allow him to communicate outside, I don't know, because he's a prisoner. But anyway, there's a radio. And he radios Tommy and Mandrake. It's Tommy's radio, but Mandrake answers it. And he tells them where he thinks that they are or where they're going, because they then transfer Dr. Houston, and somehow they know where they're transferring him to. I got lost in that again. So then we see Betty, Tommy, and Mandrake do some research where they're just flipping through books trying to figure out where he's going. I don't know how that research works. But Mandrake realizes, oh, it's 50 miles away. I'll need to take my plane, because he has a plane. He's a stage magician. He has a plane. Okay. But then when they get to the airport, Mandrake says to Lothar, you speed off. You'll probably arrive the same time I do. And I just went, then why are you taking the plane? Because I assumed you were taking the plane because you knew you would get there quicker than in the car, but you now just told Lothar he would get there in the car as soon as you would. Okay. Yeah. We then see the Wasp talking to one of his thugs, and he tells him, I have foreseen this. He knew that Mandrake had a plane. He knew that Mandrake would decide to fly the plane to get to this location. He foresaw it. And so he sends another plane after Mandrake. We then get a nice little, the effects. They apparently couldn't shoot an actual plane in the air, so it's kind of their version of a matte shot where it's something overlaid. It's a plane overlaid on a background. You can tell they just move in the picture. Anyway, and we see Mandrake inside. He's clearly just inside this little set piece flying. It's just a steering wheel. That's all it is. He's just in like what looks like a little box. He's on a little seat with a parachute on. It's just got this little wheel he's just turning. No controls other than that. Just a little wheel that he's turning. That's it. The pursuing plane, the pilot, luckily he's not inside of anything. It's one of those planes where he's exposed. He just pulls out a rifle and starts shooting. Not a rifle, a revolver. Pulls out a little handgun and just starts shooting. They didn't have the little. It would have made more sense to have a little machine gun that you usually see in movies like this, but nope. He just pulls. Yep, just had my gun in my pocket. Just gonna start shooting. He shoots some sort of cable, which then causes the plane to crash. Which again, the shot of the plane crashing is just they took that picture of the plane and just turned it so it was facing down now. However, I ain't gonna lie, you actually then see a plane crash. No explosion or anything. It just hits the ground. I don't know if they crashed an actual plane or that was a model. They did some model work there, but they crashed a plane. And of course, either way, it's a good effect. But that, of course, is our cliffhanger for chapter 6. So we're halfway through. This is a 12-chapter thing, and we're halfway through. But again, I'm reading through the comic at the same time, and these are totally different versions of Mandrake the Magician. This one in the movie serials, he's just like a private investigator of some sort. who's going after the bad guys, and the bad guys are trying to stop him. In the comic, though, he's got powers. There's been a part where a tiger turned into a woman who then assisted him on a trip. And then when she got kidnapped, they just let her go. And because Mandrake knew that she would just turn right back into the tiger and attack the kidnapper. So, yeah, very different characters here. But I'm going to continue through the Mandrake the Magician movie serial. And we'll see where that goes. But thanks for listening. Look forward to the rest of this storyline, and look forward to the next coming up episodes that we have. We're getting into March Madness. This year for March Madness, we're going to focus on Swamp Thing. So all of our episodes released in March will be about Swamp Thing. The movies, the television shows, the short-lived cartoon, for those of you who remember that. Listen for other great episodes that we got coming. It's always exciting. Rate us and review us. Help out this show as much as possible. And follow us on social media at Moving Panels on all the platforms. But for today, for this little edition of Mandrake the Magician, for Moving Panels, I'm Laramy Wells, and I'll see you on the other side of the page.
What seems to be the problem, pal?
There's just so much pain in the world, so many issues. I don't think I can bear it.
Hell, friendo, it sounds like you could use a dose of pop culture roulette.
Pop culture roulette? What's that? Some sort of pop culture themed podcast or something?
That's right, sonny boy. When hope seems far, dive into some PCR.
But I already get my entertainment news from Variety.
Huh, that's pretty good. If you're a chucklehead, PCR gives you news you need, condensed, unfiltered, and raw, from three nerds who know a little something about something.
Wow, okay, sign me up.
That's the spirit. Pop Culture Roulette. New episodes every Monday, available on all major podcast directories.